In the quiet moments of our daily lives, when the world seems overwhelming and our families face countless challenges, there exists a prayer so profound, so transformative, that many have forgotten its incredible power. Pope Francis, in his infinite wisdom and deep spiritual understanding, has often spoken about returning to the roots of our faith, to those ancient practices that our ancestors held dear. Today, I want to share with you a prayer that has been whispered in homes for centuries, yet somehow has faded from our modern consciousness. This is the prayer of family blessing, a sacred invocation that Pope Francis himself has described as one of the most powerful tools for bringing divine protection and unity to our households. But many don't know that this prayer carries an immense spiritual force, capable of transforming not just individual hearts, but entire family dynamics. In a world where families are increasingly fragmented, where communication breaks down, and where external pressures threaten to tear apart the very fabric of our homes, this forgotten prayer emerges as a beacon of hope. Pope Francis has often emphasized that the family is the domestic church, the first place where we learn to love, to forgive, and to grow in faith together. And within this domestic church, prayer becomes the foundation upon which everything else is built. The prayer of family blessing is not just words spoken into the air, it is a covenant, a sacred agreement between our hearts and the divine presence that seeks to dwell within our homes. When Pope Francis speaks about this prayer, his eyes light up with the wisdom of someone who has witnessed its miraculous effects countless times. He tells us that this prayer was particularly cherished by families in Latin America, passed down through generations of mothers and fathers who understood that their homes needed more than just physical protection. They needed spiritual fortification. Imagine, if you will, a grandmother in a small village gathering her children and grandchildren around the kitchen table each evening. Before the meal, before the discussions of the day, before anything else, she would lead them in this prayer. Her voice, weathered by years but strong in faith, would fill the room with words that seemed to create an invisible shield around their home. The children would join in, their young voices blending with hers, creating a harmony that reached beyond the earthly realm. This was not merely tradition. This was spiritual warfare, conducted in the most gentle, loving way possible. The prayer begins with a recognition of God's sovereignty over our families. Pope Francis reminds us that we cannot protect our loved ones through our own strength alone. We need divine intervention, heavenly assistance that comes only when we humble ourselves and acknowledge our dependence on God's grace. The opening words of the prayer of family blessing invite the Holy Spirit to take residence in our homes, to become the unseen but ever-present guardian of our family life. But what makes this prayer so special? What sets it apart from the countless other prayers we might recite? Pope Francis explains that this prayer works on multiple levels simultaneously. First, it creates a spiritual atmosphere within the home. When we regularly invoke God's blessing upon our family, we are literally changing the spiritual climate of our living space. Negative energies, discord, and harmful influences begin to dissipate. In their place, peace, understanding, and love take root and flourish. Consider the family that struggles with constant arguments, where siblings cannot seem to get along, where parents and children are locked in endless cycles of conflict. The prayer of family blessing becomes like spiritual medicine, healing wounds that may not even be visible to the naked eye. Pope Francis has counseled countless families who have witnessed remarkable transformations after committing to this daily practice. Children who were rebellious begin to show respect. Spouses who had grown distant rediscover their love for one another. Extended family members who had been estranged find ways to reconcile. The second level on which this prayer operates is protection. In our modern world, families face threats that our ancestors could never have imagined. Digital temptations, social pressures, economic uncertainties, health concerns that seem to multiply daily. The prayer of family blessing creates what Pope Francis describes as a spiritual fortress around our households. This doesn't mean that challenges will never come, but it means that when they do come, our families will have the spiritual resources to face them with courage and faith. There was a family in Argentina that Pope Francis knew personally before he became Pope. They were facing financial ruin, and the stress was tearing them apart. The father had lost his job. The mother was working multiple jobs just to make ends meet, and their teenage son was beginning to rebel against what he saw as his parents' failures. In desperation, they turned to their parish priest, who taught them the prayer of family blessing. They committed to praying it together every morning, before starting their day, and every evening before going to bed. Within weeks, they began to notice changes, not necessarily in their external circumstances, but in their ability to support one another through the crisis. The father found new strength to continue his job search. The mother discovered reserves of patience she didn't know she possessed. The teenage son began to see his parents not as failures, but as warriors fighting for their family's survival. Eventually, opportunities began to present themselves. The father found not just a job, but a better position than he had held before. The family's financial situation improved, but more importantly, their bonds had been strengthened through shared prayer and mutual support. This is the third dimension of the prayer of family blessing. It unifies. When families pray together, they create invisible but unbreakable bonds. Pope Francis often speaks about the importance of family unity, not as mere sentimentality, but as a practical necessity for survival in an increasingly fragmented world. The prayer serves as a daily reminder that we are not just individuals who happen to live in the same house, but we are a team, a unit that God has specifically assembled for mutual support and growth. The actual words of the prayer of family blessing are surprisingly simple, which Pope Francis says is part of their power. God doesn't require elaborate language or complex theological concepts. He responds to sincere hearts and humble requests. The prayer begins with thanksgiving, acknowledging the blessing of family itself. So many people in this world long for the gift of family, for people who will love them unconditionally, support them through difficulties, and celebrate their joys. When we begin this prayer with gratitude for our family members, we shift our perspective from focusing on their flaws to appreciating their presence in our lives. The prayer continues with a request for protection. We ask God to place His angels around our home, to guard our coming and going, to protect us from both physical and spiritual dangers. Pope Francis emphasizes that this protection extends beyond just keeping us safe from accidents or illnesses. It includes protection from negative influences, from temptations that could lead us away from God, from people or situations that might threaten our family's unity or values. Then comes the petition for wisdom. Family life requires constant decision-making. How do we discipline our children with love while still maintaining boundaries? How do we balance work responsibilities with family time? How do we handle conflicts between family members? How do we make financial decisions that honor God while providing for our family's needs? The prayer of family blessing asks God to grant us the wisdom we need to navigate these complex situations with grace and discernment. The prayer also includes a request for healing. Every family carries wounds, some visible, others hidden deep within hearts. Past hurts, unresolved conflicts, disappointments, and betrayals can create barriers between family members that seem impossible to overcome. But Pope Francis reminds us that God specializes in healing what seems incurably broken. When we regularly bring our family's wounds before God in prayer, we open the door for miraculous restoration. Perhaps most beautifully, the prayer of family blessing concludes with a dedication of the family to God's service. We offer our home as a place where His love can be demonstrated to the world. We commit to being a family that reflects God's character to our neighbors, friends, and community. This transforms our family from being merely a private refuge into being a light that illuminates the darkness around us. Pope Francis has shared stories of families who have made this prayer a central part of their daily routine and have witnessed extraordinary transformations. There was an elderly couple in Italy whose adult children had all moved away and rarely visited. The parents felt forgotten and abandoned. They began praying the prayer of family blessing daily, not just for their immediate household, but for their extended family scattered across the globe. Within months, their children began calling more frequently. Grandchildren who had seemed indifferent to their grandparents started asking to spend more time with them. The family began gathering for holidays again, and the bonds that had grown were renewed and strengthened. Another story involves a single mother struggling to raise 3 young children after her husband's death. She felt overwhelmed by the responsibility and worried constantly about whether she could provide everything her children needed. A friend taught her the prayer of family blessing, adapted for her specific situation. As she prayed this prayer with her children each day, she began to notice that they became more cooperative, more understanding of their family's circumstances, and more willing to help each other. The prayer gave her confidence that God was actively involved in her family's daily life and that she was not facing her challenges alone. But the power of this prayer extends beyond individual families. Pope Francis envisions entire communities transformed as more and more families embrace this practice. When neighboring families are all praying for God's blessing and protection, the entire neighborhood benefits. Crime rates decrease, community support increases, and a spirit of mutual care and concern takes root. This is not merely wishful thinking, but a spiritual principle that has been demonstrated throughout history. The timing of when to pray. The prayer of family blessing is important according to Pope Francis. While it can be prayed at any time, there are certain moments when its impact is particularly powerful. Many families find that praying it first thing in the morning, before the day's activities begin, sets a positive tone for everything that follows. Others prefer to gather in the evening, using the prayer as a way to process the day's events and surrender any worries or conflicts to God before going to sleep. Some families incorporate the prayer into their mealtime routine, recognizing that sharing food together is itself a form of communion that deserves spiritual acknowledgement. The key is consistency rather than perfection. Pope Francis emphasizes that God is more interested in the regularity of our approach to Him than in our ability to pray eloquently or without distraction. For families with young children, the prayer of family blessing becomes a teaching tool, as well as a source of protection and unity. Children learn that their family is under God's care, that their parents are not the ultimate authority but are themselves submitted to a higher power. This understanding helps children develop a sense of security that goes beyond their parents' ability to provide and protect. It also teaches them that they are accountable to God for their behavior toward their family members. Teenagers, who often struggle with questions of identity and belonging, find in this prayer a reminder that they are valued members of a family unit that exists under God's blessing. Even when they feel misunderstood or frustrated with family, rules and expectations, the daily practice of praying together helps maintain connection and communication. Pope Francis has observed that families who pray together tend to have fewer problems with teenage rebellion and substance abuse. The prayer of family blessing also serves as a form of spiritual inheritance that parents pass down to their children. Children who grow up in homes where this prayer is regularly practiced carry its words and concepts with them as they establish their own families. The blessing continues from generation to generation, creating a legacy of faith and family unity that extends far beyond the original household. Pope Francis encourages families to personalize the prayer while maintaining its essential elements. Some families add specific names of family members who are facing particular challenges. Others include requests for relatives who live far away or who have become estranged from the family. The prayer becomes a living document that reflects the current needs and circumstances of each unique family situation. In times of crisis, the prayer of family blessing becomes an anchor, providing stability when everything else seems to be shifting. During the global pandemic, when families were confined to their homes for extended periods, many discovered this prayer as a way to maintain peace and purpose during uncertain times. Families reported that regular prayer helped them navigate the stress of job losses, health concerns, and social isolation with greater resilience and hope. The prayer also serves as a bridge between different generations within families. Grandparents, who might struggle to connect with grandchildren who are absorbed in digital devices, find that shared prayer creates moments of genuine interaction and mutual respect. The simple act of joining voices in prayer transcends age differences and creates common ground for relationship building. Pope Francis reminds us that the prayer of family blessing is not a magic formula that will eliminate all problems from our lives. Instead, it is a tool that helps us approach life's challenges with faith, hope, and the assurance that we are not alone. Families who practice this prayer consistently report greater resilience during difficult times, improved communication between family members, and a deeper sense of purpose and meaning in their daily lives. The beauty of this ancient prayer lies in its simplicity and accessibility. It requires no special education, no expensive materials, no complicated rituals. It can be prayed in any language, in any location, by families of any size or composition. Whether you are a traditional nuclear family, a single-parent household, a blended family, or any other configuration, the prayer of family blessing can be adapted to your specific circumstances while maintaining its essential power and purpose. When we understand the historical context of this prayer, we begin to appreciate why Pope Francis places such emphasis on its importance. Throughout centuries of persecution, political upheaval, economic hardship, and social change, Christian families have turned to this prayer as a source of strength and stability. In medieval times, when plague and warfare threatened entire communities, families would gather each evening to pray for divine protection. During periods of religious persecution, when practicing faith openly could mean imprisonment or death, this prayer was whispered in secret, passed from parent to child as a precious spiritual inheritance. In more recent history, families fleeing war-torn countries have carried this prayer with them as they sought refuge in foreign lands. The familiar words provided comfort and continuity when everything else in their lives had been disrupted. Immigrant families struggling to adapt to new cultures and languages found that praying together in their native tongue helped preserve their identity while building bridges to their new communities. Pope Francis himself grew up in a family that practiced this prayer regularly. He has shared memories of his grandmother leading the family in prayer each evening, her voice steady and confident as she invoked God's blessing upon their household. These early experiences shaped his understanding of the vital role that family prayer plays in spiritual formation and character development. As a young priest, he witnessed the transformative power of this prayer in the lives of the families he served, and as Pope he continues to advocate for its restoration to daily family life. The prayer of family blessing addresses several fundamental human needs that are particularly relevant in our contemporary world. First, it provides a sense of security in an uncertain world. When families regularly acknowledge their dependence on God's protection, they develop a deeper trust that extends beyond their immediate circumstances. This trust becomes especially important during times of crisis, when human resources prove inadequate. Second, the prayer fosters gratitude and appreciation within family relationships. By beginning with thanksgiving for the gift of family, we train our hearts to focus on what we have rather than what we lack. This shift in perspective can dramatically improve family dynamics, reducing complaints and conflicts, while increasing cooperation and mutual support. Third, the prayer establishes clear priorities and values within the household. When we regularly ask God to guide our decisions and protect us from harmful influences, we create an environment where spiritual considerations take precedence over purely material concerns. Children growing up in such households develop a strong moral compass that serves them well throughout their lives. Fourth, the prayer creates sacred space within the ordinary routines of daily life. In our busy, technology-driven world, families often struggle to find moments of genuine connection and reflection. The practice of praying together carves out protected time that belongs exclusively to spiritual matters and family bonding. These moments become treasured memories that strengthen family identity and provide emotional anchor points during challenging times. Pope Francis has observed that families who pray together develop what he calls spiritual immunity against the negative influences that surround us in modern society. Just as physical immunity protects us from disease, spiritual immunity protects us from moral and emotional corruption. This protection doesn't happen overnight, but develops gradually through consistent practice and sincere commitment to prayer. The prayer of family blessing also serves as a form of evangelization that requires no special training or theological education. When friends and neighbors observe families who are peaceful, loving, and resilient, despite facing the same challenges that overwhelm others, they naturally become curious about the source of that strength. The testimony of transformed family life often opens doors for sharing faith in ways that formal preaching cannot achieve. Children who grow up with this prayer become ambassadors of its power as they interact with classmates and friends. Without being preachy or judgmental, they demonstrate through their behavior the benefits of living in a spiritually grounded household. Their confidence, kindness, and resilience become silent testimonies to the effectiveness of family prayer. Pope Francis emphasizes that the prayer of family blessing is particularly needed in cultures where individualism has weakened family bonds. In societies that prioritize personal achievement over collective well-being, families often struggle to maintain unity and mutual support. The daily practice of praying together counteracts these destructive tendencies by regularly reinforcing the importance of family relationships and shared values. The prayer also addresses the increasing anxiety and depression that plague modern families. When we regularly surrender our worries and fears to God through prayer, we experience the peace that comes from knowing we are not alone in our struggles. This peace becomes contagious, spreading from one family member to another until the entire household is affected. Children learn that they don't have to carry the weight of their concerns by themselves, and parents discover that they can trust God to work in situations beyond their control. For families dealing with serious challenges such as addiction, mental illness, financial crisis, or relationship breakdown, the prayer of family blessing becomes a lifeline. While it doesn't replace professional help or medical treatment, it provides the spiritual foundation necessary for healing and restoration. Many families have reported breakthrough moments that occurred during or shortly after times of intense family prayer. Pope Francis warns against treating this prayer as a superstitious ritual or magical incantation. The power of the prayer comes not from the specific words themselves, but from the faith and sincerity of those who pray. God responds to humble hearts that genuinely seek His presence and blessing, regardless of how eloquently or perfectly the prayer is expressed. This understanding frees families from anxiety about doing it right and allows them to focus on the relationship with God that the prayer is meant to foster. The international Catholic community has begun to rediscover this prayer through Pope Francis's teachings and personal example. Parishes are organizing family prayer workshops where parents learn how to implement this practice in their homes. Marriage preparation programs now include instruction on family prayer as an essential element of successful Christian marriage. Catholic schools are sending home information about the prayer of family blessing, encouraging students to introduce it to their families. The results of this renewed emphasis on family prayer are already becoming evident. Counselors report seeing improvements in family communication and conflict resolution among families who have adopted regular prayer practices. Teachers notice that children from praying families tend to be more respectful, cooperative, and emotionally stable. Community leaders observe that neighborhoods with higher concentrations of praying families experience less crime and greater social cohesion. As we consider the future of our families and communities, the wisdom of Pope Francis regarding the prayer of family blessing becomes increasingly relevant. In a world that seems to be fragmenting along cultural, political, and economic lines, the family remains our most fundamental unit of stability and hope. When families are strong, communities are strong. When families are spiritually grounded, entire societies benefit from their positive influence. The choice to embrace the prayer of family blessing is ultimately a choice to invest in the spiritual health and unity of our most precious relationships. It requires discipline, consistency, and faith, but the rewards far exceed the effort required. Families who make this commitment discover that their homes become places of peace, their relationships become sources of strength, and their daily lives become expressions of faith in action. Pope Francis continues to encourage families worldwide to reclaim this ancient practice and experience its transformative power. He reminds us that in a world full of uncertainty and division, our families can become beacons of hope and love. Through the simple but profound practice of praying together, the prayer of family blessing awaits our voices, ready to transform our homes into the sanctuaries that God intended them to be. Amen. If this message has touched your heart, share it with those you love. Subscribe and continue receiving words that strengthen your faith and bring hope to your family. Remember that in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, your family can become a sanctuary of peace and love through the power of prayer. The prayer of family blessing awaits your voice, ready to transform your home into the haven that God intended it to be.